That small black device felt like a block of lead in my palm, its weight far heavier than its size. I was parked in a deserted truck stop under a sky bleached pale by a brutal sun, my hands slick with a cold sweat that had nothing to do with the heat. Pressing play meant choosing to shatter the world I knew into a million pieces. I did it anyway. And nothing has been the same since. My name is Jackson, and for 20 years, the open road was my home. I'm a long-haul trucker. The job is solitary, demanding, a grind of endless asphalt and truck stop coffee. But it was honest. It was how I built a life, a family, or so I believed. The story I'm about to share is one I've carried like a stone in my chest. I'm telling it here because maybe you've felt that faint, nagging chill in your own home, that whisper that something is off. Maybe my story will convince you to listen to that whisper before it becomes a scream. Let me take you back to the beginning, to before the silence, before the lies, before the recorder. Let me show you the picture I had in my head, the one I thought was real. It was 2012. I was 32, just getting my footing in the long-haul business after years of local deliveries. She was 27. Elena. We met at a backyard barbecue thrown by a mutual friend. I remember feeling out of place, my hands rough from work, my stories all about routes and cargo. She was a ray of light. She worked at a boutique in the city, had a laugh that could cut through any gloom. Smart, vibrant, full of life. I remember thinking, what could a woman like her possibly see in a guy like me? When I got the courage to ask her that, weeks later, she said she was tired of slick talkers and empty promises. She said she wanted someone solid, someone real, someone she could depend on. I believed her with my whole heart. We moved fast. Within 8 months, we were married in a small chapel, maybe 50 people there. We didn't have much. A rented apartment with secondhand furniture that we painted together, our clothes stained with bright colors as we laughed. That laughter, it filled every corner. That was our foundation. It felt unshakable. 2 years later, our daughter Sophie came into the world. I was on a run to Denver when I got the call. I drove through the night, pulling up to the hospital looking like I'd been dragged behind the rig. But when they placed that tiny, perfect girl in my arms, I wept. I'm not ashamed to say it. I wept from a joy so profound it was almost terrifying. This, I thought, this is the point of all the miles, all the fatigue. This is my North Star. Life settled into a rhythm. I'd be gone for weeks, hauling machinery to the coast, produce to the north, anything that needed moving. The money got better. I bought us a townhouse in a quiet neighborhood. It was older, needed work, but it was ours. Elena made it a home. She left her job when Sophie was born, wanting to be there for every moment. I was grateful. The idea of coming home to a warm house, a happy child, a wife who was holding everything together, it was my entire definition of success. When our son Ben arrived 4 years after Sophie, our family felt complete. He was a whirlwind from day one, all energy and mischief, with a smile that could disarm you in a second. I provided. That was my role. I drove an aging but faithful truck, and I made sure Elena had a reliable car. I worked so they could have stability, so Sophie could take piano lessons, and Ben could play soccer, so we could take summer trips to the lake. The distance was hard, missing school plays, bedtime stories, but I'd bend over backwards to make the big moments. I once drove 700 miles straight through a storm to make it to Sophie's first dance recital. I got there with minutes to spare, still in my work boots. She saw me in the crowd, and her face lit up. That look was my fuel for the next 1,000 miles. For years, that was the truth of my life. It was hard, but it was good. It was mine. The change didn't come like a thunderclap. It was a slow leak, a quiet shifting of the atmosphere in our home. So quiet, I almost convinced myself I was imagining it. It started about 2 years ago. I'd come home from a 3-week trip, bone-tired but buzzing with that need to reconnect. Before Elena would meet me at the door, wrap her arms around me, ask about the road. Her welcome was a warmth I carried with me. Then, one return, it was different. A brief, distracted hug. "Hey, trip okay?" she'd ask, already turning back toward the kitchen or the laundry. The questions felt like a checklist. The warmth was gone, replaced by a polite, cool distance. I blamed myself at first. I was gone too much. The weight of the kids, the house, it was all on her. I tried to compensate. On my days home, I'd become a whirlwind of domesticity, fixing leaky faucets, mowing the lawn, taking the kids to the park to give her space. I'd cook dinner, do the dishes. Nothing seemed to bridge the gap. A glass wall had slid down between us, silent and impenetrable. Then came the phone. Elena had always been casual with it, leaving it on the coffee table, charging on the kitchen counter. Suddenly, it was glued to her. It went with her to the bathroom. She slept with it under her pillow. One afternoon, mine was dead, and I picked hers up to check a weather forecast. The screen lit up, demanding a passcode. "Since when do you lock your phone?" I asked, trying to keep my tone light. She didn't even look up from the magazine she was flipping through. "Everyone does, Jackson. It's called privacy. You should do it too." Privacy. The word felt alien in the context of our marriage. We'd never needed barriers like that. Around the same time, she began a passionate and expensive transformation of herself. It began with a renewed membership at a high-end fitness club, not the local gym. Then came the personal trainer, the bi-weekly appointments at a medi-spa for laser treatments and facials, a whole new wardrobe that seemed better suited for gallery openings than grocery runs. I didn't begrudge her wanting to feel good. I was bringing in good money. If this made her happy, I was for it. But the happiness I was funding seemed entirely separate from me, from us. The intimacy between us, once a steady flame, sputtered and faded to an occasional obligatory ember. Her touch became mechanical. My attempts at closeness were met with a weary sigh, a headache, an endless to-do list. I felt like a guest in my own marriage, tiptoeing around the edges of her new life. Have you ever had that feeling, where the person you share a bed with feels like a stranger sleeping next to you? You try to talk yourself out of it. You list the stress, the routine, the years. But deep down, in that primal place we often ignore, a silent alarm starts to pulse. The alarm became a siren one Thursday night. I was due back from a run to Chicago on Saturday, but we unloaded ahead of schedule. Instead of killing time at a motel, I decided to drive through the night and surprise my family. I pictured their faces, the spontaneous celebration. I pulled into our driveway just after 8 p.m., a weary smile on my face. The house was quiet, too quiet. Elena's car was gone. A knot tightened in my stomach. I let myself in. The glow of the television illuminated the living room. Sophie and Ben were curled on the couch, a half-eaten bag of pretzels between them, empty juice boxes on the floor. "Hey, my crew," I said, forcing cheer. "Where's your mom?" Sophie shrugged, her eyes not leaving the screen. "Gym, I think?" I glanced at the clock. 8:15 p.m. "The gym's open this late?" "She left after lunch," Ben said absently, clicking through channels. After lunch. The words hung in the air. That meant she'd been gone for over 7 hours. My children had been alone for hours, eating snack food for dinner. The knot in my stomach turned to ice. I made them proper food, got them bathed and into bed, my movements robotic. All I could hear was the ticking of the clock in the silent house. She walked in at 10:45 p.m. She saw me, and her surprise was a flicker, quickly masked. "Oh, you're early, yeah. Where were you?" I asked, my voice strangely calm. "The gym," she said, hanging her jacket with deliberate slowness. Then a few of us went for smoothies. Lost track of time. I just nodded. I didn't have the fight in me, but I saw everything. Her hair was perfectly styled, not a strand out of place. Her makeup was flawless, not the sweaty, washed-off look of a workout. She wore skinny jeans, heeled boots, and a silky top. No one wore that to lift weights. She looked like she was coming from a date. The lie was so blatant it was an insult. The next morning, after she'd left for a spa day, I sat with Sophie at the breakfast table. "Sweetie," I asked gently, "does Mom go out like that a lot in the evenings?" She stirred her cereal, thoughtful. "Yeah, I guess. A couple times a week. She says she needs me time. We're big kids, Dad. It's okay." I reached over and smoothed her hair. "You're an amazing big kid. Thank you for looking after your brother." But inside, a storm was breaking. This wasn't me time. This was a pattern. A secret life unfolding in the gaps of my absence. The final thread of my denial snapped a few weeks later. Elena told me she was spending the weekend with her old college friend, Clara, who was visiting the city. "Girls' weekend," she said, packing a small overnight bag with the care of someone selecting a wardrobe for a photo shoot. I knew Clara. This was plausible. "Have fun," I said, kissing her cheek. It felt like brushing against a mannequin. That Sunday, as I was helping Ben build a Lego fortress, I asked Sophie, "Did Mom mention what she and Aunt Clara were up to?" Sophie frowned. "Aunt Clara? Mom's with her friend Melissa." She showed me a picture on her phone. Melissa. A name I'd never heard. A friend that didn't exist. When Elena returned Sunday night, glowing with a relaxed energy I hadn't seen in years, she launched into detailed stories about her weekend with Clara. The fancy dinner, the comedy show, the hotel spa. She spoke with such fluid, easy conviction. She was painting a masterpiece of a lie, and I was watching every brushstroke. I nodded, smiled at the right moments, and felt a part of my soul go numb. The woman I loved was a spectacular stranger. What do you do when the evidence points to a truth you can't bear to face? Do you confront it and risk destroying everything? Or do you hide from it and risk being destroyed yourself? I was trapped in that horrible space of knowing, but not knowing. I needed certainty. Even if it was a knife to the heart, I had to hold the truth in my own hands. That's when I remembered the old digital voice recorder. A clunky little thing from a decade ago, used back when I'd sometimes need to note delivery instructions. It had a long battery life and decent memory. A desperate, shameful plan crystallized in my mind. I hated myself for it. It felt like a violation, a surrender to the paranoia that was eating me alive. But the not knowing was worse. It was a void that was swallowing me whole. I waited for her next gym day. A Tuesday. She emerged from our bedroom dressed not for exercise, but for an evening out. "I'll be back by 9, she said, not meeting my eyes. The moment her car turned the corner, I moved. My heart hammered against my ribs like it wanted out. I used my spare key to open her car door. The interior smelled of her perfume, a new, sharper scent she'd recently adopted. I looked for a spot. Not the glove box. Not under the seat. My eyes landed on the pocket behind the passenger seat, where the kids stuffed forgotten toys and crumpled receipts. I tucked the recorder deep inside, activated it, and slipped out. The next 3 hours were an eternity. I paced. I stared at the TV without seeing it. A war raged inside me, the hopeful husband praying for the dull sounds of a gym, and the terrified realist bracing for a confirmation of his worst fears. She returned exactly when she said she would, flushed and offering a cursory long workout before heading to the shower. I waited, the silence in the house screaming at me. Then I mumbled an excuse about needing air, and I went back to the car. My hands shook so violently I could barely get the key in the lock. I retrieved the small black device. It felt radioactive. I hid it in my jacket and went back inside. I didn't sleep that night. I lay beside her, listening to her steady breathing, and the recorder in my pants pocket on the chair felt like a live coal. It held the power to obliterate the last 15 years of my life. I was too scared to face it. So I waited until morning, until she left for another appointment, until the kids were at school, and I was utterly, terribly alone. I made a pot of coffee I knew I wouldn't drink. I sat at the kitchen table, the square of morning sun illuminating the grain of the wood. I plugged in the headphones, my fingers cold and clumsy. This was the point of no return. I took a breath that did nothing to steady me, and I pressed play. The first part was mundane. The hum of the engine, the radio playing pop music, the turn signal clicking, the sound of her parking, a car door opening and closing. Then, for a long stretch, near silence, just the faint, muffled thump of bass, maybe from a nearby building. My hope, pathetic and frail, began to stir. Maybe I was wrong. Maybe this was just a gym. I fast-forwarded through an hour of that ambiguous silence. Then, the car door opened again. But she wasn't alone. A man's voice, low and smooth, filled my ears. "All clear on your end?" "Yeah, it's fine," Elena replied, her voice bright, unfamiliar. "Let's go." The engine started. They drove in silence for a few minutes before he spoke again. "So," he said, a smile audible in his tone. "Did you think about me?" Elena laughed. It was a light, girlish, flirty sound I hadn't heard directed at me in years. "What do you think?" She purred. My blood turned to slush in my veins. The confirmation was a physical blow. I sat there, paralyzed, as the car stopped again. Doors opened and closed. Then, nothing. Just the empty car, recording the sound of my marriage ending. I fast-forwarded. An hour and 20 minutes of that haunting silence. Then, the doors. They got back in. The engine roared to life. She drove for about 15 minutes before stopping again. The passenger door opened and closed. He'd gotten back in. "Just for a minute," Elena said, tension creeping into her voice. "I really have to get back." "This'll be quick," the man replied, his voice dropping into a serious, businesslike cadence. "We need to talk about the future. We can't keep doing this forever." And then they started talking. And the world I knew didn't just crack. It vaporized. "He's bound to get suspicious eventually," the man said. "I don't think so," Elena replied, a defensive edge there. "He's oblivious, buried in his road maps and logbooks. Maybe. But let's be smart. What's the endgame here? You file for divorce?" Elena sighed, a sound of pure frustration. "And then what?" "He gets the kids. The house is in his name. I'd get nothing. I'd be starting over with nothing. There was a pause. A chilling, calculating pause. Then the man's voice, lower now, intimate and deadly calm. There's another way. A cleaner way. You told me he has that life insurance policy, right? The big one for the long-haul routes? My breath hitched. The policy. A $350,000 policy the company required for certain cross-border routes. I'd named her the beneficiary without a second thought. Of course I had. What about it? Elena asked, her voice barely a whisper. Truckers have accidents all the time, he said, the words casual, almost bored. Fatigue. Mechanical failure. It's tragic, but it's common. No one asks too many questions if it's done right. I couldn't breathe. The room tilted. I gripped the edge of the table. What are you saying? Elena's voice was trembling now, but not with fear, with a terrible, eager tension. I'm saying we make it look like an accident. I know people. It can be arranged. Something in his coffee before a long drive. Something with the rig's brakes on a mountain pass. Clean. Simple. Then the money is yours. The house is yours. The kids are yours. And we're free. I tore the headphones off, my stomach heaving. I stumbled to the sink, dry heaving over the porcelain. The words echoed in my skull. Make it look like an accident. Something in his coffee. The money is yours. This wasn't just an affair. This was a conspiracy. A murder plot. My wife and this stranger were calmly discussing my murder as a logistical problem to be solved. The mother of my children was weighing the cost of my life against her financial comfort. I slid down to the cold tile floor, my back against the cabinets. The familiar kitchen, the fridge covered in the kids' drawings, the calendar with my travel dates circled, felt like a movie set, a fake reality, masking a horror show. The love of my life, my partner, was planning to have me killed. The pain was a white-hot spear, but almost instantly, it was cauterized by a surge of pure, primal rage. Then, just as quickly, the rage was smothered by a cold, clamping terror. They were planning to kill me. It wasn't a thought. It was a fact. It was my new reality. I sat on that floor for a long time, listening to the hum of the refrigerator, the distant bark of a dog. A normal morning in a normal neighborhood. And in my kitchen, a man had just learned he was living on borrowed time. I had to move. I had to think. The kids would be home in a few hours. Elena would be back. I had to look normal. I had to act normal. While inside, every instinct screamed to run, to grab my children and vanish. But I couldn't. Not yet. If they suspected I knew, they'd move faster. The accident would happen sooner. I picked myself up. My legs were weak. I walked back to the table and stared at the innocent-looking recorder. That little box held a death sentence. My death sentence. What would you do in that moment? Your world has just been revealed as a stage for a play where you're the mark, soon to be written out. Do you run? Do you fight? Do you scream? I had to make a choice, and I had to make it right then, with the clock ticking down to an appointment with a rigged truck or a poisoned thermos. My mind, trained by years of navigating deadlines and road hazards, kicked into a grim, survivalist mode. This was no longer about a broken heart. This was a tactical problem. My life and the lives of my children depended on my next moves. I had the evidence. Now I needed a plan. And I needed to start executing it before my wife and her lover decided it was time for my final haul. I stared at the digital recorder on my kitchen table. It was no longer just a device. It was a ticking bomb, and the countdown was to my own murder. The initial wave of nausea and terror receded, replaced by a chilling, hyper-focused clarity. My emotions were a luxury I couldn't afford. I had to be a strategist now, a survivor. First, secure the evidence. I went to the old desktop computer in the corner of the living room. My fingers, now steady with purpose, copied the audio file onto 3 separate USB drives. I emailed it to a secret account I created. I uploaded it to a cloud storage service I'd never used. I wanted that recording in a dozen places, a hydra they couldn't kill. The original recorder? I hid it inside a hollowed-out textbook in a box of my old things in the garage, a place Elena would never look. Second, identify the enemy. I had a voice, a cruel, confident baritone. He'd said, "It's not the first time I've done this kind of thing." That wasn't a boast. It was a profile. This was a man with practice, likely connections. I needed a name, a face. I needed to know what I was truly up against. I had one reliable contact from my past, Leo. We'd served together years ago, before the trucking life. He'd stayed local and now ran a small, discreet private investigation firm, mostly insurance fraud and background checks. I called him, my voice stripped of all emotion. "Leo, I need a favor. It's urgent." We met in a diner on the other side of town an hour later. Over bad coffee, I gave him the stripped-down version. "Elena's having an affair. The guy is dangerous. I just have his voice. I need to know who he is." Leo, a man of few words and sharp eyes, listened without interruption. "Voice is hard," he finally said. "But you said he's local, slick, maybe with a shady past? Talks like he's in charge?" I nodded. Leo scrolled through his phone, then turned it to me. "This ring a bell? Garrett Rhodes. Owns a chain of those quick lube places and used car lots. Got investigated a few years back for warranty scams, intimidation. Case fell apart. Witnesses recanted. Word is, he's into more than bad oil changes, and he's got a reputation with women." The photo showed a man in his late 40s, tanned, with salt and pepper hair and a smile that didn't reach his eyes. He wore a tailored suit at some charity event. My gut, that primal instinct I'd ignored for too long, twisted into a knot. That's him. The arrogance in the posture matched the command in his voice. "Where does he operate?" I asked, my voice flat. "Main office is in the business park off the highway, but he's a ghost. Moves around. Be careful, Jack. If it's Rhodes, you don't want him knowing you're looking." Leo's warning was etched in the lines of his face. Careful was no longer an option. I drove to the business park and parked across from a sleek building bearing the logo Rhodes Automotive Group. I waited. For 2 hours, I sat, watching employees come and go. Then, just as I was about to leave, he emerged. Garrett Rhodes, in person. He moved with a predatory ease, flanked by 2 men who looked more like bodyguards than assistants. He got into a black SUV with dark-tinted windows and drove off. I followed at a safe distance, my heart a dull drumbeat in my chest. He didn't go to another office. He drove to the same upscale fitness club Elena belonged to, the one called the Apex. He parked in a reserved spot and strode inside without a glance. The pieces clicked together with an almost audible snap. This wasn't a coincidence. This was the hunting ground. Have you ever had a suspicion confirmed with such brutal, visual finality? There's no more room for doubt, no more bargaining with your own mind. The truth is sitting there, in a black SUV, and it's ugly and real. In that moment, I didn't feel anger. I felt a profound, isolating sadness for the life I thought I had, which was now irrefutably gone. It was a funeral for my own marriage, held in a parking lot. I needed more than audio. I needed visual proof. For the next 3 days, while telling Elena I was pre-trip planning, I became a ghost in my own city. I dug out an old digital camera with a long lens. I followed her. On Wednesday, her spa day, I watched her meet Rhodes in the Apex parking lot. They didn't go inside. They got into his SUV and drove to a modern apartment complex on the riverfront, the kind with keypad entries and underground parking. I couldn't follow, but I didn't need to. I took photos from a distance, Elena laughing as she got into his car, Rhodes's hand on the small of her back as they disappeared into the building entrance. An hour and 45 minutes later, they emerged. She looked relaxed, glowing. He looked pleased. I captured it all, the mundane horror of their routine. Each click of the shutter sealed something shut inside me. The love was gone, burned away. What remained was a steely determination to protect the only real things left, Sophie and Ben. The planning in my head shifted from gathering evidence to executing an exit. A divorce lawyer would be too slow, too visible. They'd be tipped off. I had to disappear with the kids, and then unleash the evidence from a place of safety. I thought of my mother, living alone in her quiet house in a small town 3 states over. It was far enough. It was sanctuary. The trigger came sooner than I expected. On Friday, Elena announced she was visiting a sick aunt for the weekend. "She needs family right now," she said, her eyes full of fabricated concern. I knew this aunt. She lived in Florida. It was a perfect alibi, a 2-day window. "Of course," I said, squeezing her shoulder, fighting the revulsion that rose in my throat at my own touch. "Take all the time you need. The kids and I will have a guys and gal weekend." She left Saturday morning. I spent the day giving my children a perfect, normal day. We went to the Science Museum, ate too much popcorn at a movie, had a silly, loud dinner at their favorite burger joint. I memorized their laughter, the light in Sophie's eyes as she explained a dinosaur fact, the smear of ketchup on Ben's chin. This was what I was fighting for. This pure, uncomplicated love. That night, after I was sure they were deeply asleep, I moved like a shadow. I packed 2 large duffel bags with their clothes, favorite stuffed animals, essential documents, birth certificates, my passport, social security cards. I packed my evidence, the USB drives, the camera's memory card, printed photos. I left behind almost everything of my own. Things were just things. I filled a backpack with snacks, water, and a first aid kit. The feeling was surreal, like I was an actor in a heist movie, but the loot was my own children's future. Just before midnight, I gently woke Sophie. Her eyes fluttered open, confused in the night light's glow. "Daddy? What's wrong?" "Shh, sweetheart. We have to go on a little adventure. A surprise trip to Grandma's." "Now? In the dark?" She whispered, intelligence flashing in her sleepy eyes. "Right now. We need to be very quiet. Can you get dressed? Warm clothes." The seriousness in my voice cut through her confusion. She nodded, a soldier receiving orders. Ben was harder. He grumbled and whined, half asleep. "Daddy." "No. Bed." "Ben," I said, firm but calm, holding his small face in my hands. "We're going on a secret mission. I need my best partner. Can you do it?" The word mission hooked him. He blinked, nodded, and let me dress him. In 20 minutes, we were creeping down the stairs, bags in hand. I loaded the car, a nondescript sedan I used for local errands, not my truck. I buckled them into the back seat, their small faces pale and solemn in the streetlight. Sophie clutched her rabbit. Ben hugged his dinosaur. "Does Mommy know?" Sophie asked, her voice small. "She knows we're going to see Grandma," I said, a half-truth that tasted like ash. "She'll meet us there later." It was the first lie I'd ever told them that felt like a betrayal. But it was a necessary one. I pulled out of the driveway at 12:37 a.m. I didn't look back at the house. In the rearview mirror, I saw Sophie watching it shrink until it vanished around a corner. Then she turned and stared out her window into the dark. Ben was already asleep again. We drove through the sleeping suburbs, onto the highway, heading north. The vast, empty ribbon of asphalt was usually my workplace, my prison. Tonight, it was our river of escape. I set the cruise control right at the speed limit. No risks. Not tonight. Have you ever driven through the deepest part of the night? With everything you love sleeping in the back seat, and everything you fear possibly following behind? Every pair of headlights in the mirror is a threat. Every slowdown is a potential trap. Your mind races through every possible thing that could go wrong. It's a unique kind of solitude, charged with a desperate, protective love. About 2 hours in, Sophie's voice, quiet and clear, cut through the hum of the engine. "Daddy, yeah, honey, we're not coming back, are we?" The question hung in the air between us. I met her eyes in the mirror. She was too perceptive for platitudes. "Not for a very long time, Soph. Things at home are very complicated right now." She was silent for a mile. "Then, did Mommy do something bad?" My throat closed. "How do you answer that?" "Mommy made some very bad choices. Choices that mean we can't be there right now. This is about keeping you and Ben safe. Do you understand that?" She nodded slowly, her chin trembling. "I understand." She didn't cry. She just turned back to the window. A little girl aging years in minutes. The weight of her quiet acceptance was heavier than any sob. We drove through the rest of the night. I stopped only for gas, paying with cash from an emergency stash I kept, using bathrooms while keeping the kids in sight. The world outside the windows changed from familiar sprawl to anonymous farmland to wooded hills. With every mile, the tension in my shoulders eased a fraction. The sun was just painting the sky in streaks of pink and orange when I turned onto the familiar, tree-lined street of my childhood. My mother's white clapboard house with its wide porch and sprawling magnolia tree looked like a vision of peace. I pulled into the driveway, the crunch of gravel sounding like a final sigh. I rang the bell. It took a minute. Then the porch light flicked on, and my mother opened the door, wrapped in a robe, her hair sleep-tousled. Her face moved from confusion to concern in an instant. "Jackson? Lord, what's happened? Is everything all right?" Her eyes darted to the car, where the kids were still slumped in the back. "Mom, we need to stay here. For a while. Can we come in?" She stepped back immediately. Of course. Bring those babies in." She ushered us into the warm, cinnamon-scented kitchen. I got the kids onto the living room couch under blankets, where they succumbed to exhaustion almost instantly. In the kitchen, under the soft glow of the pendant light, I told my mother everything. I played a short clip of the recording on my laptop. I showed her the photos. I watched the color drain from her face, her hand rising to her mouth. The woman who had welcomed Elena into our family, who had doted on her as a daughter, now looked shattered. "Oh, my boy," she whispered, tears welling. "My poor, poor boy." She came around the table and pulled me into a fierce, unconditional hug. It was the first safe touch I'd felt in months, and for a moment, I was a scared kid again. I let myself lean into it. Just for a second. Then I straightened. Mom, I have to go to the police. Today. With this. But I need you to keep the kids here. Hidden. Don't answer the door for anyone but me. Don't answer the phone if it's an unknown number. She nodded, wiping her eyes, a steely resolve replacing the shock. They're safe here. No one will touch them. You do what you have to do. A few hours later, showered and dressed in clean clothes, I walked into the small town police headquarters. It felt surreal, stepping from my world of interstate conspiracy into this quiet, wood-paneled office. I asked to speak to someone about a conspiracy to commit murder. They put me in a small interview room with Detective Bryson, a woman in her 50s with a no-nonsense demeanor and keen eyes. I laid it all out. The affair, the recording, the insurance plot, the identity of Garrett Rhodes. I handed her a USB drive. She listened without interruption, taking sparse notes. When I finished, she leaned back. Mr. Wells, this is an extremely serious allegation. You understand that? I have never understood anything more clearly in my life, Detective. She plugged in the drive and listened to a key section of the audio, her face impassive. When it finished, she was silent for a long moment. We'll need to open an investigation. This will involve contacting the authorities in your home jurisdiction. You and the children will need to be kept safe. Where are you staying? With my mother, here in town. No one knows. Good. Keep it that way. Do not contact your wife. Do not answer her calls. We will coordinate the arrests from this end to ensure they happen simultaneously. If Rhodes has the connections you suspect, we don't want any tip-offs. The word arrests sent a jolt through me. It was real. The machine was in motion. I returned to my mother's house, a strange numbness setting in. The active part, the running, the gathering, was over. Now, there was only waiting. The calls started that afternoon. Elena. Dozens of them. Then texts, escalating from confusion to anger to panic. Where are you? Jackson, answer me. I'm calling the police. I blocked the number. She called my mother's landline. We let it go to the old answering machine. Her voice, shrill and demanding, filled the quiet house. Maggie, are they there? Put Jackson on. This isn't funny. We erased it. The waiting was its own kind of agony. The kids were confused and clingy. Ben asked for his mom. Sophie was withdrawn, watching me with two knowing eyes. I tried to explain in the gentlest terms possible, telling them Mommy had done some very wrong things with a bad man, and that we needed to be away while the police sorted it out, that a divorce was coming. It was a conversation no parent should ever have to have. 2 days later, Detective Bryson called. Mr. Wells. It's done. Local PD and state investigators moved at 6 a.m. this morning. Elena Wells and Garrett Rhodes were taken into custody separately. They're being held without bail. Charges are conspiracy to commit homicide and attempted insurance fraud. I sank onto my mother's porch step, the phone pressed to my ear. The relief was so profound, it was almost dizzying. Thank you, Detective. Don't thank me yet. Rhodes is already talking, trying to cut a deal. He's blaming her, saying she masterminded it, that he was just going along. Your wife is denying everything, calling it a fantasy, a game, but the recording is solid. We have the financial motive. It's a strong case. I didn't care about their blame game. The immediate physical threat was over. The monster under the bed had been pulled out and handcuffed. I could breathe. I told the kids their mother had been taken in by the police for the bad choices she'd made. Sophie cried, a deep, grieving cry for the mother she'd lost long before today. Ben just looked confused. I held them both, my own tears finally coming, a messy mix of grief, relief, and exhaustion. For a few days we existed in a fragile bubble of safety. My mother's home became our fortress. Then, as I was tucking Ben in one night, my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. It wasn't Elena. It was worse. The message was brief, and it turned my newfound relief back into ice. "You think it's over?" "Wrong. We know where you are. Sleep light." Can you imagine that feeling? The moment you think the mountain has been climbed, the battle won, and then you look down to see the ground crumbling beneath your feet. The arrest wasn't the end. It was just the end of the beginning. The true cost of crossing a man like Garrett Rhodes was coming due, and the invoice was addressed to me and my children. The text message glowed on my screen in the dark bedroom, each word a drop of freezing water down my spine. "You think it's over?" "Wrong. We know where you are. Sleep light." The fragile peace of the last few days shattered. Rhodes might have been in custody, but his world, a world of intimidation and shadowy connections, was still very much operational. My hands were cold as I immediately called Detective Bryson. She answered, her voice alert even at the late hour. "Bryson, it's Jackson Wells. I just got a threat. A text." I read it to her. I heard her sharp intake of breath. "All right, don't delete it. Don't reply. I'm putting a patrol car outside your mother's house within the hour. They'll be there in shifts, 24/7. Do not let the children leave the house. Do not answer the door unless you see an officer you recognize through the window. We'll trace the number, but it's likely a burner. This is a pressure tactic, Mr. Wells. They want you scared, to maybe make a mistake, to run. Don't give them what they want." The next morning, a squad car was parked discreetly down the street. Officers Miller and Hayes introduced themselves, their presence a comfort and a chilling reminder all at once. Our world shrank to the confines of my mother's home. We pulled the curtains. Groceries were delivered. I taught Sophie and Ben silly indoor games, trying to mask the fear that crackled in the air. Sophie, of course, sensed it. "Daddy," she asked one afternoon, her voice low as we built a Lego castle, "are we hiding from the bad man's friends?" I couldn't lie to her anymore. "Yes, honey. For a little while. The police are making sure we're safe." She nodded, a solemn understanding in her eyes that no 11-year-old should possess. "Okay. We'll be quiet." The waiting was a new kind of torture. Every creak of the old house, every car that slowed on the street, sent my heart into my throat. I slept with a baseball bat beside my bed, feeling both ridiculous and deadly serious. My mother moved through it all with a steely grace, her focus entirely on baking cookies and reading stories to her grandchildren, creating a pocket of normalcy in the heart of the siege. A week later, Detective Bryson called with an update. We traced the threat. It was sent by a low-level associate of Rhodes, a guy with a rap sheet for petty crime. He flipped immediately when we picked him up. Said Rhodes had a contingency plan to scare you from inside, but there was no actual hit ordered. The guy was just trying to earn favor. The immediate threat is neutralized. The tension that had been holding me rigid for days bled out, leaving me weak. So, it's over? Really over? The active threat from that vector is over, Bryson said carefully. But the legal process is just beginning. The district attorney will be in touch. You'll need to testify. And your wife's family, they may make things difficult emotionally. But physically, you and the children can begin to breathe. It was the permission I needed to start living again, tentatively. We opened the curtains. We took walks in the backyard. I enrolled the kids in the local school, a fresh start with new names carefully managed by the DA's office for their protection. They became Sophie and Ben Ward for school purposes. It was strange teaching them to answer to a different last name, but they adapted with the resilience of the young. I found work with a regional freight company. The pay was less than the long-haul routes, but I was home every other night. The trade-off was priceless. I was there for homework, for nightmares, for breakfast. I saw my children's faces more in a month than I had in years. The guilt over my previous absence, once a dull ache, now flared sharply. Had my physical distance created the emotional void Elena filled with someone like Rhodes? I wrestled with that question in the dark hours, but I knew, ultimately, her choices were her own. My choice had been to provide. Hers had been to conspire, to murder. The months rolled on, marked by seasons and school events, not by the countdown to a planned accident. We were building a new, quieter life. My mother's house became a true home, filled with the sounds of a rebuilding family. Sophie threw herself into her studies, excelling. Ben made friends on a local soccer team, his boisterous energy finding a healthy outlet. The specter of the upcoming trial loomed, but it felt like a storm on a distant horizon. Then the DA from my old city called. The trial date was set. Garrett Rhodes was fighting hard, with expensive lawyers claiming entrapment and manipulated evidence. Elena was maintaining her story. It was all a dark fantasy, a role-playing game taken out of context. My testimony, the DA explained, was the linchpin. I would need to come back and face them both. How do you prepare to walk back into the ruins of your old life? To sit in a room and publicly dissect its destruction? To see the person you loved and the person who wanted you dead, and speak the words that could lock them away for years? It's not about revenge. It's about accountability. It's about drawing a final, official line under the horror so you can finally walk away. The morning of my testimony, I kissed my children goodbye at my mother's. I'll be back tomorrow, I promised. The courthouse in my hometown felt like a museum of a past life. Everything was familiar, yet utterly alien. In a witness room, I waited, my stomach in knots. They brought Elena in first. She was wearing a simple, ill-fitting dress, her hair pulled back. She looked smaller, older, hollowed out. Her eyes scanned the room and found me. For a second, there was a flash of the woman I knew. Then it was gone, replaced by a look of sheer panic before she stared at the floor. Any last phantom feeling for her vanished. She was just a person in trouble. Rhodes was brought in separately. He wore a tailored suit, his posture defiant, a smirk playing on his lips. He looked at me, and his gaze was pure, calculated contempt. I held it, my own expression blank. He looked away first. When I was called to the stand, I swore to tell the truth. I told our story, from the barbecue to the roadside recorder. I spoke calmly, clearly, focusing on facts. When the DA played the audio clip, Rhodes's voice suggesting a mechanical failure on a mountain pass, a collective gasp went through the courtroom. I didn't look at the defendants. I looked at the jury. I saw their faces shift from curiosity to shock to grim understanding. Elena's defense attorney tried to rattle me. "Isn't it true, Mr. Wells, that your long absences drove your wife into loneliness? That you emotionally abandoned her, pushing her into the arms of another man?" "My job supported our family," I replied, my voice level. "I was never unfaithful. I never plotted her murder. The lawyer pushed on, trying to frame the recording as a private, twisted game. Couldn't this plot have been a form of escapist fantasy? A way to vent frustration? I looked directly at the jury. They discussed specific methods, a specific insurance policy amount, and a specific contact who could make it look like an accident. That's not a fantasy. That's a plan. Before I was dismissed, Elena asked to address me directly. The judge allowed it. She stood, her hands trembling. "Jackson," her voice broke, "I am so sorry. I was lost. He promised me things, a different life. I was weak. Please tell the children I love them." She was crying now, her performance achingly believable. Was it real remorse? Or just another act for the jury? I stood as well, feeling the weight of every eye in the room. "Elena," I said, my voice echoing in the silent court, "I forgive you." A murmur rippled through the gallery. "I forgive you for my own sake so I don't have to carry this hate. But the court isn't here for forgiveness. It's here for the truth. And the truth is on that recording." I sat down. Rhodes snorted audibly, a sound of derision that his lawyer frantically tried to shush. The trial lasted 4 days. The jury deliberated for 8 hours. The verdict: guilty. Garrett Rhodes was sentenced to 12 to 15 years in a maximum security facility. Elena received 8 to 10 years in a state penitentiary, the judge citing her manipulation and ultimate consent to the plot, but acknowledging she was not the primary architect. As the sentences were read, Elena swayed and was helped out by a bailiff. Rhodes glared at me, the smirk finally gone, replaced by a look of pure, impotent hatred. I felt nothing, no triumph, no joy, just an overwhelming, draining finality. It was over. Back in our new life, the seasons turned. We sold the townhouse for my old life, severing the last financial tie. With the money and with my steady regional work, I bought a modest 3-bedroom house with a big yard in our new town. It was ours, free and clear, a clean slate with no ghosts in the halls. The kids grew. Sophie, once withdrawn, blossomed into a sharp, compassionate teenager, talking about becoming a therapist. "I want to help people who've been through hard things," she told me. Ben's soccer skills earned him a spot on a competitive travel team. His laughter, once tinged with confusion, became full and free again. The hard part became navigating the aftermath of their mother's imprisonment. Elena's mother contacted me, a woman aged by grief and shame. She didn't ask for justification, only for a chance for her daughter to have some connection to the children when they were ready. I promised I wouldn't stand in the way of their choice. When Sophie was 15, she asked if she could write to her mother. "I have things I want to say. Questions." I agreed. The first letter was stiff, full of hurt. Over time, a cautious, painful correspondence began. Sophie needed to understand. I never read the letters, but I saw the process help her. It was her path to walk. Ben, younger and more direct in his emotions, wanted no part of it. "She hurt you," he said simply. "I'm not ready." I respected that too. My own life was my children, my work, and the peace we'd built. There were no grand new romances. The well of trust had been drained deep, and I had no interest in trying to prime it. My happiness was found in the mundane, coaching Ben's team, helping Sophie study for exams, sharing a coffee with my mom on the porch as the sun set. Years passed. 5, to be exact. I received a formal notice that Elena was being considered for parole. They asked for my statement. I thought long and hard. The rage was gone. All that remained was a hope for my children's peace. I wrote that I had no objection if the board deemed her rehabilitated, not for her sake, but because clinging to anger only gives the past a home in your present. The board ultimately denied parole. She would serve at least 2 more years. Then, one autumn day when Sophie was 17 and applying to colleges, she asked to see her mother. I think I need to see her, to know who she is now. Before I leave home, we arranged a meeting in a supervised visitation room at the correctional facility. I drove her. I waited outside. When she emerged an hour later, her eyes were red, but her posture was straight. "Well?" I asked gently. "She's sad. And older." She talked about her therapy, her regrets. It felt real, Dad, but it also felt like talking to someone I used to know a long time ago. She slipped her hand into mine. "Thank you for bringing me. I think I can move forward now." That was the closure she needed. For me, closure had come the day I drove away in the dark, the day I chose us. So, here we are. It's been nearly a decade since that night in the truck stop parking lot. I'm in my late 40s now. My hair has more gray. The calluses on my hands are from coaching soccer and fixing things around our house, not just from a steering wheel. The road is still part of my life, but it no longer defines it. My family does. Sometimes, on a quiet night run, I'll think about it all. The terrifying chain of events that began because I finally listened to that nagging voice telling me something was wrong. I didn't want to believe it. I tried to explain it away for months. But in the end, facing that terrible truth was what saved our lives. If I had ignored it, if I had chosen the comfort of the lie, I wouldn't be here. My children would be living in a house paid for with blood money, raised by a woman who helped plan their father's death and the man who engineered it. I learned a brutal lesson. Trust is the cornerstone of everything, but intuition is its guardian. If something feels off in your relationship, in your home, don't bury it. Don't excuse it. Investigate it. Have the hard conversation. Demand transparency. The truth may be painful. It may upend your world. But a painful truth is always, always better than a beautiful lie. A lie can kill you. The truth, no matter how ugly, gives you the chance to fight. I fought. And we survived. My story is extreme, I know, but the principle isn't. Listen to that quiet voice. Protect your peace. And never, ever apologize for doing what you must to keep yourself and your loved ones safe. If this story resonated with you, if it made you think or feel something, then do me a favor. Let me know down in the comments where you're listening from, just the city or the state. I'm always amazed to see how far these stories travel. And if you want to make sure you don't miss the next real-life story I share, hit that subscribe button and ring the notification bell for Jackson Stories. This channel is built on sharing these raw, real journeys, and your support is what lets me keep doing it. Thanks for listening. Thanks for being part of this community. Stay safe out there.